Hey everyone, it's Blake with FicheBait. In this video, we're going to walk through the Laserfiche Fall 2025 release features. This is a major release that includes SmartField's AI-powered metadata extraction, repository field formulas, out-of-office handling for automatically assigned tasks and forms, and a lot more. Let's go take a look. To start, we're going to take a look at the Laserfiche installer. It's had a few updates, including a user interface update. So you can see here it looks quite a bit different than the old version of the Laserfiche installer. They overhauled the UI, changed the icons. We don't have rows anymore. It's pretty clean and neat. It's real easy to see if there's updates available. Allows you to scroll through the list pretty simply as well. We'll kind of look through the different options here. So if we go to our settings, we can see that that looks a little bit different as well. We can verify our firewall and proxy information, and we can verify that we can connect up to our directory server. We have options to install from local, which allows you to go through and browse out to an exe file. We can open log files, choose a language. We can also download applications, and then also refresh, where it will go back out and check if there's any updates. We also have a nice bulk install uninstall option. So we click that, we get a little modal pop-up window, and we can come in here and select what we want to install or uninstall. If you want to uninstall, just uncheck it and click modify. It tells you right here it will be uninstalled. So that's nice. You can also see which applications are not currently installed on this machine. So these are the services that I don't have installed on this server. And I could select one of those and install it. You can also update or repair something from here as well. You have the Laserfiche installation guide, link down here in the bottom left. There is actually an unattended installation now where you can go through and use a command line interface named lfget.exe, and you can perform unattended installations. So that's also new. You can go through and figure out how to do that, especially if you have multiple machines across an organization that you need to do that install for. So very handy. Something else that's been included with this version is called the Central Configuration Editor. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And what this allows you to do is create a configuration file to use during your installations. So if I went through and I wanted to, let's say, install the skim service, you'll notice over on the right-hand side there's a central configuration area where you can click browse, and that will allow you to browse out to the config file that I was just talking about. So let's go back to our central configuration editor, and I'm going to say create a central config file. If you've already created one, you can open an existing one and edit it through this as well. It's basically just a GUI interface to edit an XML file. So when I click edit or create a new one, it comes up and says, okay, where do you want to save this file? So I'm just going to say name it configuration file, we'll save it, and then it comes up with a nice interface. So you'll notice on the left-hand side, we have a list of all the different Laserfiche services where we can configure an account to run that service. So you can select to use the default if you want to, or you can specify local system, local service, network service, or a custom account. If you choose a custom account, you can type in here a domain account. So domain / whatever the username is. That's what most people have, is they have some kind of utility or service account that they use for that. This now also supports GMSA accounts. So if you have one of those, you can put that in here as well, and that will be used. So once you have all that, what will happen, you can actually come in here and export the configuration file. And then when you do that install, like I showed earlier, you would click Browse Central Configuration, select that central configuration file, and then for any services that the application you're installing, it will look to see, is there a Windows service configured in that XML file that I use? And if so, then use the account specified. During the install, it will prompt you to enter the password as well. So you'll see that when you actually run the installation. Obviously, not all of the Laserfiche applications require a Windows service to run, so this doesn't always apply. But it is nice where you can go through and create that file. I like to save it on like a network folder, and then I configure all those services for the accounts that I want, and then I can browse to that from every server that I'm doing an install from. And that way I know that I am setting the correct service account every time I do an install. There were also a few updates to some of the installers themselves, so you'll notice that some of those have been simplified even more than what they were before. And the next thing is updates to the repository web client. So I'm going to go ahead and close our installer and configuration editor here. And one of the main updates for the repository web client is smart fields. You've probably heard about smart fields. It was a big thing for Laserfiche Cloud. It essentially uses the Laserfiche AI to go through and extract data from documents and populate metadata for you. So it's a very powerful tool. There are a few configuration things that you need to do. So first off, you do have to be on a self-hosted subscription license in order to use the Laserfiche AI features, including smart fields. So if you're not on that, go talk to your solution provider. You can get the conversation started for what it would take to switch over to the subscription licensing. Once you have that, in the Laserfiche support site, you will have the option to create basically a restricted Laserfiche cloud account. And I say restricted because you're not going to get full cloud, but in order to get the keys that are needed to use Laserfiche AI, you have to have that cloud account to get that information to plug in to what I'm going to show you here. So that's kind of the first step, is you need to walk through that, get your activation keys. It's a one-time opt-in, and then you can come in and configure that. Another thing that is new for that is a Laserfiche AI service for self-hosted. And I already have it installed. And after you install it, it has a website that you can go to and you can configure your Laserfiche Cloud API connection. So again, this is where that cloud account comes in. There are instructions in the help files of how to do this, but you can see here it's a pretty simple setup. There's not a lot to it. And then what you would do is within the web client, you'll come out to Administration, Integrations, and you'll see here that there's a Laserfiche AI Service tab where you can enable Laserfiche AI, give it the AI Service URL, which is wherever you have the AI service installed locally, the connection key, and then you can enable smart fields, and there's also an option have smart fields automatically extract data from your documents. So that's how you would go through and turn that on. Let's actually walk through how you configure smart fields in a template. So I have a couple templates here. I'm going to come down and I have one for invoices. So when I select my template, you'll notice that this is that new designer that's been out for a while. I'm going to click on Modify Template. You'll notice over on the right-hand side, I don't have the option that you used to see in Cloud, and that's because in my self-hosted environment, I don't have a key for Laserfiche AI, so I can't show that to you. But what you would see is there would be a checkbox here to say basically use with smart fields. You would check that box, and then that makes the description field required. So in the description field is your AI prompt. So you are telling Laserfiche AI how to go through and extract the data that you want in this field from the document that it's looking at. And I've done a video previously about this, of how to use it in Cloud. It's the exact same way in self-hosted. So if you've seen those videos, again, it's the same thing of how you go through and configure it. So some of the things that you can use smart fields for: line item extraction, complex table parsing, handwriting recognition, data analysis. You can use it to generate executive summaries, translation of documents, and perform sentiment analysis or other things if you want. So there's really quite a bit that you can use Laserfiche AI for with smart fields. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to look at is repository field formulas. So if you are used to doing field calculations in Laserfiche forms, so if I come in and look at the same template that I had selected for the smart fields, I'm just going to go back to the edit, the modify tab. And if I select one of these fields, you'll notice that in the properties pane, I have an advanced tab. And underneath advanced, I now have the ability to create formulas. So you can use formulas for all sorts of different things. You can do basic calculations, data manipulation. You can reference other fields. You could populate an expiration date automatically. You'll set up different logic rules, calculations on tables, right? So lots of different things. And again, this is very similar to what you get in Laserfiche forms. So you have all these different functions. And then here's the fields that are in your template, right, that you can use. So that's a really cool feature. You can also make the field read-only. So that way, if you have the calculation running on it, someone can't override, right, what was populated from the calculation. So another really useful feature added. Again, it's almost identical to what you have in forms. So if you're used to that, you pretty much already know how to use it in the repository. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at are enhancements in searching. So the updates that we have in searching, the first one is in the quick search. So if we click the drop down here, and we come down to like date modified, for example, you'll see that we have the ability to select last 7 days, last 30 days, or even a custom range. So that's pretty cool. If you were to have a saved quick search, right, you can actually save that. It'll stay relevant rather than setting it with like today's date, for example, and then you have to go back through and change that. So the last 7 days, last 30 days are now relative date ranges, unlike before. You can also do some additional search options. So if we go to search filters, I'm going to choose a template here. Oh, let's try a different one. So in account statement, if we have a date here, we can say older than, right, between, after. So if I say begins after, I can say this number of days, weeks, months, or years. Again, this now stays applicable or relative based on what you put in and doesn't save today's date as part of that search going forward. Same thing if I did older than, right, I get the same thing there. So that's really nice. Another thing, if we go back to quick search real fast, underneath custom quick search, you can say now match all or any. So you now have a little more control over that logic of how it performs those quick searches for you. All right. The next thing that we'll take a look at is the repository settings restrictions. So for that, I'm going to go back to administration. And I'm just going to go to the everyone group. You can see the same thing underneath a specific group if you go there as well. But if I go to the everyone group, you'll see that there's now a settings restrictions area. This replaces the previous manual attribute editing. There's also a settings lockdown, if you remember what that was called. This is basically that same thing. The help file has a lot of good information about what each one of these categories does and what's involved with them. So I recommend to go check that out and read through it. But essentially what you're able to do is lock down what a group, or the everyone group in this case, is able to make changes to. And again, this really applies to different attributes that are set. So I could lock down the search settings and control what those settings are for everyone. So the way that this works is if we go to like default options, there is a search tab underneath here. So I could come through and set default options and control what all those are. I could also go through and set attributes. So after you've gone through and done that, you could come in and lock down certain categories, and that would restrict any users within that group from making any changes to those. So again, the help file has a lot of good information on it. It also has lists of different attributes that you can go through and add in here if you want. Another way that you could do it is if you have a test user that you create, you go into the client and maybe go through and make a change to a search option, right? And then when you make that change, it will, depending on what it is, it will usually create an attribute underneath that user. And so then you can just go into the attributes for the user, copy that out, and then come in here and put it in. So that's another way that you could go about that. But again, a really useful feature, being able to lock certain things down for different users. Some examples of what you might want to lock down. All right, so search settings, being able to control, are they able to do fuzzy searches? Because that is more taxing on your system to be able to perform fuzzy searches. Are they able to perform in the quick search? Are they able to perform text searches? Things like that. So some really useful features there that you can take advantage of from an administration point of view. Okay. There was an update to the Office plugin as well. It has a few different fixes in there, so that may be useful for you. Some other enhancements, I'm going to go back to metadata. And we'll go to templates. And I'm just going to edit this template here. If you go to rules and you add a rule, you can now choose what to do with that hidden data. So how that data is handled. So very similar again to forms. You can save all fields when hidden, or discard it, or ignore. So that should look really familiar to you if you're used to Laserfiche forms. Another thing that was added is actually on the web client configuration. So if we go there, there is a security tab navigation down here. And you'll notice now that you are able to set the HSTS and other things in here. There's defaults that are automatically set based on what's considered secure from a default point of view, but you can come in and now have control, an easier way to edit those settings for you. Okay, and other than that, there are a handful of other fixes and stuff that were included with the web client, so be sure to check that out. Next, we're going to go ahead and go to the administration hub. And there were a handful of updates with the administration hub. So the first one I'm going to look at is if we go to diagram, it's a little hard to see on my system because I only have one server, but it will actually list different ports. So you can see here when I choose Laserfiche directory server, even though it's pointing to itself, you can see the 5048 port number. We have 443, port 80, right? So you can now see which ports are being used for those connections. So really useful, especially as you're talking about firewalls that may need to be opened. It gives you a better view into what those are. If we go back to servers, if I click on the server on the right-hand side, you can now set a friendly name. So if I say primary server and save that, you'll see on the left-hand side in parentheses it puts primary server. You can now search on the friendly name, description, and installed applications in the server list as well up here with your search box. So that's really useful. If your applications have an update available, so very similar to Laserfiche installer, you'll notice that there's a little update icon letting you know that there is an update available for that app. So just one more thing to make it a little easier for you to know what's going on with your environment. And again, there are a handful of fixes that were included with the administration hub, and so you can check out the changelog if you want to know more about those. All right. Next up, we have directory server. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually go into the LFDS STS configuration page. And you'll notice that this looks a lot different than what it looked like before. Really, before you had down to here, and now we have a lot more, right? So we do have a lot of security settings that we now have access to, make it easier to control those. But my absolute favorite is this new customized sign-in page. So if I click on that, you now have the ability to customize what that LFDS STS login page looks like. Right? So if I were to open up an incognito window here, and I just browse out to Laserfiche, right? This is the default. But if I come back here, you'll notice that there's a message down here that says the system has been upgraded to the latest versions. There's currently no planned downtime, right? If I come back, you'll notice that's where this comes from. So you have more control over what shows. You can also add a fave icon, a background image. You can add your company's logo. You can control the header text, header, footer, sign-in button colors, custom iframes if you want to. So there's a lot more that you can now control. This message notification down here, you can actually put it on a schedule. So that message will show up until 3/31/2026 at midnight. So some really cool stuff. I'm really excited about the scheduling of the messages, for example, because you could actually put in there, right, that you have an upgrade planned and there's expected downtime. So now every time your users log in, if we go back to that login page, they would see that message up here every time, as long as you're using directory server authentication. All right, so let's go back here. All right. The other thing that you can do is underneath settings for LFDS, there is now enable automatic login. In this case, we can do it with Windows Authentication. If we had a SAML identity provider enabled, we could actually choose to automatically log in with the SAML authentication. So you could hide the Laserfiche and Windows Authentication buttons and then have it automatically sign in with that SAML account. So that's really cool too. Some other things, not really able to show you, but some other improvements is there's a new Active Directory group sync option. So there are some changes there. Again, that's in the changelog. You can read about what's different. But if you were using that sync option within LFDS, they have created an updated way that the Active Directory groups are synced now. So you can look into that. Within Directory Server itself, if we go to Accounts, this is another favorite of mine. When you perform a search, it can now search across different values. So you can now search all user claims, such as email address, display name. And if you hover over the little information tag here, you can even specify. So if you want to search on first name, you can do FN and then put the first name in, or LN and then search on the last name. So you can specify which value you're actually searching for. Really useful. Before, it was basically the account, the user account that you were searching on. So I've been in lots of different environments where the user accounts aren't always the friendliest. Sometimes they're a little encryptic. So not being able to search on a user's name made it really hard to go find their account when you have thousands of accounts in a system. So definitely a welcome change. Within groups, you can now come in and export the member list for a group if you need to do that. So that's really useful. And then also underneath the group, you can now click through to the user. So that was not available before either. All right, so those are the directory server updates. Next, let's go ahead and go to Laserfiche Forms. And in Laserfiche Forms, the main new feature that's been added is out-of-office handling. So if you click on your name in the top right and go to Account, you'll now see an availability section. So if you click this, you can now set your availability. So whether or not you'll be in during certain days or times, and that will set your out of office. So something to be aware of on this is this really only works with like the round robin feature. So if you're assigning a user task using round robin for team-based, this is when that comes in. They have talked about improving this for other scenarios, but currently that's what it's used for. So you would set this, and if this person is out of the office, they were the next in the round robin, it would end up skipping this person and going to someone else. So again, a useful feature, but only available in certain situations right now. And hopefully they have more improvements coming. All right, the next one is in reports. So if we go to reports, and if we have a custom report that we're using, we can edit that report. And now on our filters, we can set relative date ranges. So if I come in and I have a start date, I can now say is on, is in, is before, is after. And those ones are the same, but if I come in and I say is in, you can now see that I have some of the options that I had before, but now I can say within the last X amount of days. So this makes it a lot more dynamic. If you're doing like accrual reports or something like that, or you always need a report that is giving you information on the last X amount of days, this becomes very useful. A couple other features that have been made available in the Forms object scripting is being able to set a field required or optional, and then also being able to set the tab title. So I know a lot of people miss that from the old Forms Designer, the classic Forms Designer, that is now available in the modern Designer. And then again, there are a lot of different fixes and stuff for forms as well, so definitely recommend checking out the changelog. All right, next thing that we're going to take a look at is Laserfiche workflow. So along with the Laserfiche smart fields and the web client, Laserfiche workflow actually has a few new items for the toolbox. So if I scroll all the way down to the bottom of the toolbox, you can see I now have an artificial intelligence integration section. The first one of these is AI translation, and then we have custom AI task. So for AI translation, it's exactly what it sounds like. You can send information out to a local LLM or your own LLM that your organization has, and you can have it translate text and return the results as tokens. And the way that we set that up is if we come over to the server, you'll notice that there's web service. And if I want to go through and add a new web service, you'll notice that there's a new type called AI. So you can give it a name, give it the URL. You would then use an API key, and you would get that from your LLM. The service type right now is OpenAI compatible. That's the only one. If you click the help button, in the help files, it does list compatible LLMs that were currently tested. So you can go take a look at that. That doesn't mean that those are the only ones. And then you would fill in your other information here for the web service and click OK. And then that's the web service that you would choose. From there, you can do plain text or tokens. Right, so we can come in here and pass in different tokens from our workflow. And then you would end up getting a result from that. So if I have, we'll just say assign token value activity, just so you can see what this looks like. You can see that AI translation, we have was translated. And then we would also be able to receive back the actual text back, right, for the translation itself. All right. The next one is the custom AI task. This one's pretty interesting. So again, you would have the web service, go through and set that up. And then this one has different types of prompts. So with this, you can send it messages, you can have conversations. When we select basic, you get some like pre-written prompts here that you can choose from. So you can say improve my writing. You'll notice here that they just have a little prompt for you to use. And you can pass in additional text. We can also pass in different tokens. So maybe you're retrieving text from an entry within the repository, right? You could pass that in. Or maybe you're receiving that from forms, right? So you can use any of that information to pass it to the AI and then get your result back. One of the more interesting ones is this last one called describe an image. And you'll notice that at the very end it says image file token. So there are a couple of activities that go along with this. And one of them, let me see if I can find it here, is the download electronic file. So if we have that, now you can see that I have a result file token. And you can put the result file token in the prompt, and it will actually send the document to the AI, and then the AI can use that document for whatever you're prompting it with. So pretty useful. You can also do it with attachments from a forms process. So some pretty good use there. You can also do advanced, and then you can add your message. There's different roles that you can use. If you want to know more about what those are, you can look at the help file. It'll go through and describe it all for you. So this is really for those organizations where maybe you don't feel comfortable sending all your information to a third party, right? So in this case, usually Laserfiche AI with smart fields or something. You want a little more control over that. Or maybe you're already paying for an LLM, right? You don't want to pay additional for Laserfiche AI. You would be able to use that to send that through and be able to retrieve information back. I don't know how good it is about when you receive the information back, receiving it in a format where, like if it was an invoice like we talked about before with smart fields, how easy it is to say, hey, give me the invoice number off of this, give me that, right? There is the option, if you click the configuration, the cogwheel, where you can join an AI conversation with a specific ID. So when you do start the conversation, if we look at the tokens, you'll see that we actually get back a conversation ID. So maybe you're sending the image, and this is your first prompt, and then you have another task after that where you say, hey, give me back the invoice date. And you want that same conversation to move forward, so you could pass in that conversation ID, right? So there's various ways to kind of use this. Again, I haven't had a lot of time to play with it for those types of scenarios, but definitely play around with it, find out how to use it best for what your needs are, and share with the community when you find out. So it's a new feature, so the more you're able to share, the more we can help everyone in the Laserfiche community. All right. And then the next feature that I'm going to show, I'm just going to come back here to the web services. And one of the options that's been added if you choose custom for a web service is you can now use OAuth 2.0 authentication. So that's a pretty big one. That's really become the standard when communicating with different web services. So that is now an option for you. If you've been waiting for that, you're probably clapping right now. So I'd love to see it add. All right, we'll go ahead and close workflow. The next one that we're going to take a look at is Laserfiche Import Agent and Email Archive. So Import Agent and Email Archive both got facelifts. They join version 12. You can see it looks a little bit different. Still similar, right? But has a nice little updated look. Both Import Agent and Email Archive could also now be installed from the Laserfiche installer, so those are supported. Just like all the other products, the OCR engine has been updated, and it now supports expanded languages. So that's really nice to see if you're in another country or you are working with documents with different languages. That's now there. An import throttle option also allows you to throttle the document import rate. So for example, Import Agent can import at a much faster rate than Workflow can process the documents. So that can sometimes cause a bottleneck and performance issues for the workflows in the system. So in this situation, you may want to limit importing like 1,000 documents every 10 to 15 minutes, depending on performance. So there is an option to go through and do that. You can see here the different menu items that you're already used to. We go into options, right? We can still connect it to a DCC. We have our OCR settings, file types that we can use, and then our advanced So that's where all those settings are. It now supports multi-repository Laserfiche cloud environments. So if you're using that, that's a nice add-on as well. An import agent basically has or email archive has the same look and feel as an import agent. Again, there are other fixes and things that are available in this, so go check out the changelog to see what those are. Laserfiche scanning and snapshot also received updates, so you can go and take a look at those. They've gotten the facelift along with everything else. So, and again, they all have updates, fixes, and stuff like that to them as well. Snapshot. One of the updates for Snapshot is that the local printer and shared printer versions are now available as separate applications in the installer. So they can also be installed on the same machine. So there was an issue when version 12 first came out where that wasn't possible. That's now been fixed. All right, well, that's all I've got for the fall 2025 release of Laserfiche. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Gave you an idea of what they've come out with, what new features you may want to look into. If you have enjoyed it, give the video a thumbs up, leave a comment below, and until next time, keep phishing.